I remember very well George and I talking, and I suppose he was being somewhat philosophical, or maybe just testing me and him. And he said, "You know, Suzanne, if I weren't a choreographer, you wouldn't look at me twice." And I looked at him and I said, "You know, George, if I weren't a ballerina, you wouldn't look at me twice."
I think how you dance is who you are, and that's what he fell in love with.
The person sort of came along with the dancer, and the person came along with the choreographer.
I don't think anything or anyone could have stopped this destiny that was happening.
I was the youngest of three girls. My sisters and I and my girlfriend used to play a lot of dress-ups.
Cincinnati was the cradle of the stars. A lot of famous people came from Cincinnati, including Doris Day, Rosemary Clooney, Vera Ellen. So we were very conscious of the arts.
I didn't like ballet classes in the beginning. There was 15 minutes of acrobatics, and I was good at that, and I liked that. I could show off a lot more at that than I could at ballet.
She was a tomboy, but she turned out very elegant in the end.
I had a good friend, Kate Kahn, and we'd put on big 33 1/3 records of Swan Lake, and we'd each do our own choreography. And she had two big armchairs in the living room, and one of them we named Michael Soames from the Royal Ballet, and the other one we named Jacques d'Amboise from the New York City Ballet. And we would piqué arabesque and then lean on our stomach and fall over into the armchairs, waiting arms.
My ex-husband said to me, "What makes you think the kids have got talent?" I said, "I don't think they've got talent. I know they've got talent, and I want them to have a chance."
I wanted so bad to be in a company. I had seen pictures of the New York City Ballet, Mr. Balanchine, looking somewhat somber and disciplined and austere. But that didn't matter. I was going to dance for him.
In Cincinnati, I decided that I'd gone as far as I could go with the girls, and I was unhappy there.
I took my toe shoes and my dance clothes and my ballet records, and Mother took her nurse's uniforms and an ironing board and put it all in a U-Haul trailer and strapped it on the back of our Ford and headed for New York.
I just didn't have one single doubt in my mind. I just decided that we were gonna come, we were gonna make it, and we were gonna stay.
Someone had recommended the Ansonia because famous opera singers and people who had been successful had lived in the Ansonia. We were living in a tiny one-room apartment. For that whole first year, none of our boxes were ever unpacked. Mother worked almost 20 hours a day.
We lived pretty frugally.
But we were happy. I just knew that at that time I needed to be a dancer. Mother had called the School of American Ballet, and they had arranged for me to come in and have an audition on my birthday, August 16th.
I was sitting there on the bench waiting for Mr. Balanchine. We were waiting, and he came in, and I said, "Oh my God, there he is." And he walked right by, didn't pay any attention to me.
And he said, "Do you have a number, a routine to show me?" And I hadn't prepared anything. I thought it would be a format similar to the one in Cincinnati. And I started to panic that my big moment was already over with, that I didn't have something to show him. So I said, "Well, I can perform what I did in the recital." And he said, "Fine," and leaned against the bar and sort of looked down his nose, and not a smile, no hint of any kind of emotion on his face. And to fill this void in the room as I danced, I started to sing along. And it was Glazanov's The Four Seasons. And it just seemed to go on forever. I felt another disaster. And finally, he clapped his hands and he said, "Fine, that's enough. Thank you. Goodbye." We were confused. Nothing in Cincinnati had prepared us for this moment. Cincinnati was a small town, movies, nothing had shown us how to react to this particular day. So we just sort of looked at each other and sat back down on these red vinyl benches like they had in cafeterias in those days. Even now when I see one of those, it reminds me of the audition day. And these gray walls around us sort of closing in, and we just looked at each other and felt lost. And feeling very dejected when the next day the phone rang, and it was the School of American Ballet telling my mother that I had been offered a scholarship. That was just the best birthday present I could have had. Isa, that's right. And fifth, finish. Other side, same thing. And the one. And not only are you looking at your beautiful hand and fingers, but you're participating in a dance, not just an exercise. And one, don't wash the floor. It's a port de bras, a carry of the arm. It's true, we are servants of the dance, but we are majestic servants. We are not washing the floor. And one. September 6, 1960. Dear Diary, this morning I had my first class at the School of American Ballet. I have decided to use A, excellent, B, very good, C, good, D, poor in grading my classes, okay? Being the best is my goal. October 7. Today was my first Adagio class. Jacques d'Amboise was my partner. Wow, he's so cute, nice, wonderful, and what a dancer.
I saw at the School of American Ballet the very young, beautiful dancer, very serious, 16, 17. And I asked her to take Adagio class with me, because whenever I saw talented girls, I would take them and work with them in Adagio. I loved working with Adagio, partnering.
I did pretty well, B, considering I was so tense and horrified at being his partner. You can't imagine how thrilled I was. 5, 6, head 7, 8, and 1. 8 counts to développé. 4, 5, 6, 7. Développé means to develop. I got a rose yesterday for Valentine's Day, and the rose, I watched it all day long. It never was the same. It started opening, each petal opened. That's what a développé is like. Each petal opens and reveals yourself, yes? And then the final thing is when you raise your arm. One afternoon, Mr. Balanchine came in and watched for about 20 minutes and left. And on my way back to school, as I was running out the door, his secretary, Barbara Horgan, called me over to the desk, and she said, "Suzanne, Mr. Balanchine would like you to join the company if you're interested." And I thought that was such a casual way of asking someone to join in the company that they've only been dreaming about for so long. And of course I said yes. I didn't even have to go home and think about it. I don't know what gave me the reason to think that I would need to have a stage name, but I thought that I really wanted to be someone else. I went to Barbara and I said, "How does one go about changing their name?" And Barbara said, "Well, who would you like to be?" And I said, "I've decided after looking in the phone book that I would like to be Suzanne Farrell." And she put parentheses around Ficker and typed in Farrell, and she said, "Here you are, Miss Farrell, your contract." October 24th, 1961.
And I remember, waiting to come on as the prince in Swan Lake in the back. And there is the court of ballet dancing. And the last girl on the edge in the dark is Suzanne Farrell, dancing with all the energy and life and passion on her face and, extreme. I mean, everything. There was nothing held back. And I thought, my God, that girl is great. She's never going to fail because even when no one is looking in the dark, she's dancing as if she's alone, and it's the only performance, and the last performance of her life, it was everything. But Balanchine did not really pay attention to her that much. She was there as a possibility of being a future great dancer, but just possible. It wasn't there yet. And at that time, his interests mostly were, Tanakil had polio, his wife, and he was concentrating on creating works, and his muse was Diana Adams, and maybe Allegra Kent, too. Balanchine was doing the premiere of a piece called Movements for Piano and Orchestra, Stravinsky. And Diana and I were the principal dancers. It was terrific, and the most difficult counting I've ever done in my life.
Diana Adams, who had always wanted to have a baby, became pregnant, and her doctor had advised her not to dance, hardly to move.
So Balanchine was distraught. He never, he never had understudies.
It was difficult for him to imagine anyone else in the ballet, and it was scheduled to be premiered in about a week.
And when Diana announced that she wasn't going to dance, he was crushed, and like you couldn't talk to him for 3 days. He disappeared. He wouldn't answer the phone. He told me, "She stabbed me in the back." Diana standing in the back. So anyway, we were going to have to cancel. And John Tarras, I have to say, John Tarras said, "No, we can recreate it. Diana will help lying down. Jacques will use Suzanne. Why not?"
Well, Mr. Balanchine wasn't very interested. He had lost Diana and his whole image of what the ballet was going to look like. So he said, "Fine, if you want to go do that, Jacques, go and do it. I'm not going to have anything to do with it."
So we would go, Suzanne and I, to visit Diana. It's our living room. We'll roll back the rug, put the chairs aside, and Diana was on a couch, lying flat. And with her hands, she would show, all the steps. And we would do it. And the concentration, quiet, and Suzanne would concentrate like this and learned everything so quick.
It was complicated, first of all, if you have the music, but there was no recording of the music available in those days. There was no pianist, obviously, and they were just sort of humming the music, giving me counts, saying, "Now you run downstage this way and you take this pose. Now you do a little turn here and I'll pick you up and turn you upside down there." It was terribly, terribly complicated.
And finally, Balanchine, almost disgruntledly, almost like half of him didn't want to admit that it would work, and he wanted to cancel everything. The other half was hoping that it would work. And he came and he saw how terrific she was. And then he said, God sent her to me because he took Diana away and he gave me Suzanne.
2 days before the premiere, we had a rehearsal in the studio, and I felt it was just a terrible rehearsal. And I don't know where I got the nerve to tell him, but I said to him, you know, Mr. Balanchine, I just don't think I'm ready for this ballet. I'm just not good enough. And he looked at me and he folded his hands, and then he looked up and he said, dear, you let me be the judge. And I thought to myself, well, if he's going to trust me, then I will never question his decision again. The ballet was extremely well received. Stravinsky was there, and he said to Mr. B, who is that girl? I've never seen her around before. And Mr. Balanchine turned to him and said, Igor, this is Suzanne Farrell, just been born.
And then he saw her differently. He saw her as his muse then. He began to see her as someone that would inspire him and that he would choreograph for.
The fall season, I was told that he wanted to do something special for Jacques and I.
And he went on about the violin, and you and Suzanne will do this. And it is a man going through life and having something and losing it and being enriched because of it, a better person because of it. And then he started choreographing meditation.
At one point, after a few rehearsals, Mr. Balanchine was called to Europe to choreograph in Hamburg. And I had received a letter from him, and I hid it in my drawer after I read it, very embarrassed as to what all of this meant, and we never spoke about it ever in our lives.
Dear Suzanne, here is the poem I promised to you before I went to Hamburg. That is how Jacques should feel when he is dancing pas de deux with you. Show to him and to Diana, she is your Diana angel, but not to anyone else. And then the poem is written in red ink. I can't forget this blessed vision. In front of me you stood, my love, like instant moment of decision, like spirit beauteous from above. Through languor, through despair and sorrow, through clamor and through restless space, I heard your voice from night till morrow, and dreamt of darling face. The years of storm compel surrender, dispel and scattered dream of mine, and I have lost your voice so tender, and face so heavenly divine. P.S. I hope by now you are thin and beautiful and light to lift. See you soon, your G.B.
I was 18. I had never been in love, and here I was doing this very romantic pas de deux, choreographed by this man that I idolized with my armchair partner, Jacques d'Amboise.
I think there's something very special about meditation because I think it expresses Balanchine's statement about life. Many of his works have to do with a muse, a woman, an ideal that a man attempts to own touches and passes with for a moment in his life and is doomed to lose it. And it's necessary to lose it. Otherwise, there's no striving for anything better anymore if you achieve what you have dreamed of. You must not achieve it. You must not possess it.
In retrospect, when I read back again, he was choreographing my life, and that was fine with me, you know. He, at one point, later on, he said, you only have to listen to one person because there's so many people who will tell you what to do. Critics, friends, teachers. You will have so many opinions and choices of how to live your life. Just listen to me. And I did. What I learned from Mr. Balanchine, I learned in class. Anyone else would have heard the same thing had they been there. Everyone was encouraged to experiment in class. He was gleaning a lot of knowledge from you in the classroom as to what would eventually be possible on stage. He wanted us to try, and he said, it's not important whether you do the step or not. What is important is that you try. And one day it will happen, it will come. It frequently seemed excessive to me. I thought this man is just a little over the edge in asking for extremely fast tendus, and hundreds of them. I just sort of put on my blinders and went along and did what he asked for. It never occurred to me that anyone would resist him. Jacques and I stood together in class all the time. We shared each other's passion for dance, and we also were having a lot of fun experimenting. And more frequently, we were partnered together in ballet. So we developed this wonderful friendship. And I'm very grateful to Jacques because he was a principal dancer with the New York City Ballet, had been on Broadway, a star, and I was just a nobody, and he was not afraid or embarrassed to be seen with somebody in the corps de ballet.
I loved her because she was terrific. She was a beautiful woman. She was a little bit like my protege. I mean, I felt almost like a mentor towards her. She irritated me. You know, sometimes she'd seemed obtuse and stubborn and everything. She'd do a step and it wouldn't be what she felt it should be, and it would be perfect. And should, you know, pout or say, I have to do it again. And you'd say, come on, let's go on. It's fine. And she'd say, you know, you'd say, all right, let's do it again. And then you'd go do it again. And you'd think, oh, she's just being stubborn or wants attention. So you thought she was great. She was thinking, I'm not so good. I did badly or something. But she never expressed it.
I learned a lot from him. He taught me about abandon. I had never heard that word applied to dance before, and I thought it was such a wonderful word where you can really just abandon yourself to the music and to the space.
And we shared each other's deviltry and daring and unpredictability on stage. I think Mr. Balanchine, in a way, became younger when he worked with me, and I became a little older, so that we met each other at the same point in time with our dancing, choreography on stage. It meant that all the years that he had choreographed before I was alive, all those ballets that I subsequently danced that were choreographed for other dancers in the past, it was like I lived his whole life plus mine. And it was just a wonderful way of living at the same time and the same place, even though chronologically we weren't there. That's better. Maybe I told you to go too much upstage, and it's more around, so you can come back in. I gave you a wrong direction, more around, so that's right. And come down more instead of go upstage, probably.
That was a little better. You didn't see it, but it was.
I did eventually take over all of Diana Adams's roles, including Monumentum Pro Gesualdo, which was the last ballet she coached me in.
Early.
Sorry.
Your shoe squeaks, Maria.
Yeah.
Like
Do that.
You're hovering.
A little less.
Hovering.
Yeah.
Yeah. You even hear in the music, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, as opposed to when we did all these pliés now. Now you don't change the level of your head. All this time in the studio and all these ballets, I think, was a prelude to what Mr. Balanchine had wanted to do all his life, as he told me. One day, he said he had plans to do a big, extravagant 3-act Don Quixote. One of the terrific things about Mr. Balanchine is he had no idea what was going to happen in the studio. He had in his mind the vision of what it would look like, but steps were unformed. And I think he could be like that because of all the experimenting that we had done in the classroom. He often would say, "I've never been on point. Is this possible?"
And now he was starting to
Ask me to wobble and to fall off balance and recover and turn. And I'd say, well, it's not possible today, but it's not impossible. Let me work on it. That was the beginning of Mr. B and I really talking to each other, and not necessarily with words, but with our dancing, our bodies, and the steps that he asked me to do, and the answers that I would give back to him through the steps. So it was really the beginning of our getting our professional lives entwined and our private lives entwined, and working long days in the studio, and then walking home after the end of the day and stopping off at Tiptoe Inn for something to eat. I suppose there were some problems in our relationship, although everything was negated when we were in the studio and on stage. He was married. He was 42 years older than I was. Not that that ever made a difference to me. Everything that mattered was all fine when we were working. The first night was a benefit gala, and Mr. Balanchine decided to play Don Quixote himself. Well, of course, I was extremely honored, frightened to death. For such a big ballet and something so visible, so public, we really only existed for each other. The performance was almost a release of all the feelings that had been going through us that we didn't have the nerve to say, or perhaps didn't even know what was happening.
Don Quixote, her dancing that wonderful dream ballet and that solo is among the great performances ever by anybody. And there is an example of complete abandonment and a demon. It's almost like, I always say, every once in a while you see dancers, they transcend a person. They become a conduit for a force, like the muse of dance or the goddess of dance, using a person as a window to express or communicate something. And that person becomes transformed into something bigger than just a beautiful dancer. And I'll never forget, several times in my mind and memory is Suzanne dancing like a demon, but a goddess.
There'll just never be another night like this. Afterwards, we were at the party, dancing. I had my first taste of champagne, saw my mother over my shoulder, but we would much rather have been alone, so we left early and headed off for Dunkin' Donuts. Had coffee and donuts and talked about how wonderful the ballet was and how special we felt in it, and the upcoming performances, and just life would go on like this forever.
In the summer of 1965, the New York City Ballet went on a tour of Europe, and we started in Paris.
I was 19, and it was the first time I had ever been in Paris dancing as a ballerina. All I wanted to do was to dance for George. We walked in the evenings after performance along the Seine. Sometimes we wouldn't say anything. We would just walk and know exactly what each other was feeling. It was like our lives had become possessed. We could have done anything. In New York, all of our hours were basically spent in the theater or working. And we had so little private time together. It's almost hard to understand how even we grew to love each other so much, since we didn't have each other's private lives. Being in Europe on the crest of Don Q and that riding high like that, we just didn't think about anything negative. It didn't exist. We were in our own world. So whereas I was very happy on stage and working with George, which he asked me to call him, and I always found it difficult to call him, I could see that people were starting to talk about me and feeling it in the way they would say hello or they wouldn't say hello. Words like Mr. Balanchine is obsessed with her would be whispered, and it made my life very lonely.
After and during Don Quixote, one began to observe that there was this relationship beginning to develop between the two of them. The extent of it, none of us knew really per se, but you could see some kind of wedding of minds and concepts and ideas happening at the same time. And so consequently, when we went to the European tour, some of the other ladies and ballerinas were a little nervous because everyone wants to be the apple of Mr. Balanchine's eye.
But I would always call him Mr. Balanchine in front of the company, and not because I was trying to pretend that there was nothing going on between us, but because there was always that awe that I had for him, the fear of the Lord that I had for him, in addition to the love I had for him. There's something really daunting and wild about having your first love be this God, this man that you admired and wanted to dance for all your life. The fall season was the most intense, nonstop dancing I had ever experienced. I danced every night at least, and sometimes twice a night, and did 28 leading roles in the repertoire. Everything was just perfect. And at the same time, it wasn't perfect. We would spend some evenings, we'd have dinner together, but he had to go home to his wife. I had to be there when it was okay for me to be there. And yet, when it wasn't okay for him to be there, no explanation, just suddenly, I would be escorted by Eddie Bigelow back to my house. It was confusing. I had only turned 20 on that tour.
And I felt that maybe he himself was going through a turmoil because he had an allegiance and love for Tanny. But on the other hand, the new muse was coming in.
I wasn't about to give him up because he was what I believed in. That was where the crises, the desperation of the whole situation was so palpable, is because neither one of us could change. Our whole life was in Don Q, and you can't suddenly negate all that and say it didn't exist and go back.
For a while, it was all right to pretend that everything else didn't exist, but that was just not the case. And people started talking more, things started being written in the paper. I was not the first ballerina that caused this kind of upset. He was in a habit of falling in love and marrying his ballerinas. And although I was told that I could be just another one in a long line of ballerinas, I was determined not to be. I couldn't handle the situation. I couldn't change it completely, but I wasn't going to be just another one. I had decided I would be different, hopefully by virtue of my dancing.
She's extremely musical. She's very fast, and she was never afraid of falling off point. She seemed to answer what he needed at that particular time.
Suzanne, in the later part of his life, was his muse and was the great inspiration for him. And he never had enough. He had other people after that that he was inspired and he did ballets for, but no one ever in the later part of his life like Suzanne. That was the last great muse for Balanchine.
The other pas de deux in Midsummer was with a totally unlikely partner. I wake up from my dream and I have fallen in love with the first thing I see, which is this donkey. And it's one of the most humorous parts of the ballet and one of the most touching also, and all based on vulnerability and clumsiness. And this was my first love. I had no experience in knowing how to handle anything. And of course, our romance was already more heightened because so much of it took place on stage and all of our feelings took place in the ballets that we did. At the same time, there was always the reality that this is sort of impossible. This just isn't right. I remember a particular point in time we were in Chicago doing Midsummer Night's Dream, and the next day in the press they had a photo of George and I at the cocktail party, clinking glasses and very happy. The press said, George Balanchine and his ballerina Suzanne Farrell at a party last night. They will be wed soon. He hadn't said anything like that to me, and I didn't know how to handle that. I said, "Did you say this?" And he said neither yes nor no. So there was no discussion, which just left me to stew. By then, Mother was very fond of George and would have loved that situation.
The age difference didn't bother me. All the marriages didn't bother me. I thought that was okay because he wasn't just any old man. Mr. Balanchine was a genius. He was a living, working genius, and that's a big difference.
Well, you know, people talk about love, but the thing is that when you're in love, you're in love. But if you've been around the block many times, you've got much more experience than someone who's only been around once. So the relativity of it and the intensity of it is still different. I mean, so it's still love, but when you have a young person who's falling in love for the first time with a genius, it may not be a physical, it may be a intellectual, it may be an emotional, but not a physical love. But then someone who is older, who's been through it, they want everything in that love. They want it to encompass everything that's about them. And I think that was one of the things that really hadn't happened.
I'm sure he wanted that. I mean, you know, we'd go away to Europe together, you know, but I don't know, maybe it was my little Catholic upbringing, maybe it was the way I perceived love and everything. I just wasn't ready for that. I think having a sexual relationship with him would really have altered things. When he was dancing with me, choreographing a ballet, it was extremely physical and extremely gratifying in that kind of way. I mean, it certainly was not the orthodox way of having a relationship, but it was more passionate. Time dancing in high heels, and it was fun because I had my old partner back again, Arthur Mitchell, and obviously it was going to be a Broadway kind of ballet, somewhat sexy. I was, after all, supposed to be a striptease girl.
But she had to take the clothes off, and she had to focus on me in a sort of animal magnetism kind of way, you know, to be a come on, you know? And it just wasn't her style in a sense, so she was a little awkward. So again, I would talk to her. I said, Miss Showbiz, come on, here we go. Da-dum, da-dum, go-dum, 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 go. And by the time we got to the stage, she let her hair hang out and she was working the floor. So I said, Suzanne, let's go out and compete. Let's become friend and ginger.
George and I were, in a way, a couple, and yet, at the same time, I was the third person in this triangle. And that bothered me. It was almost as if when I would be in an accepting period and feel a little bit less guilty, he was in a guilty period because something had happened on his end. And when he had solved his problem, I had reached a point where I was no longer comfortable with it. Obviously, he was unrelenting on his side. He was going to have what he wanted, he always had, to possess physically, to possess time-wise, to really, to own me in a way. Because it seemed, you know, what started out as this great love that George and I had, which was consuming in a good sense, that that you couldn't wait to be with each other suddenly was burning you out. I was being killed by it, and I was worried that if I didn't leave, I was going to do something drastic. Suicide went through my mind. And in the midst of all this, I had to get out there every night and dance as if nothing was happening. Especially if the situation was starting to become bigger than I felt I could handle. Ballet became my salvation.
I just went up to Suzanne one day. We had become friends just through our work, and asked her if she'd like to take a Daja class. And I don't know why, I just wanted to ask her, and I was surprised when she said sure.
It was mostly the fact that I was comfortable with him and that I didn't feel I had to explain or apologize for my loving Mr. B and all the stories that had been going around. Paul thought that George and I had a working relationship.
My beliefs in George Balanchine were so strong also that I just maybe didn't want to believe all this was going on necessarily, or I didn't know. I mean, there was one strange situation. I used to sometimes stay with Suzanne till late at night after a performance or whatever and keep her company. Then I'd go home. And then I'd get up early and go back and get it. There used to be a tip-top inn or something somewhere uptown on the west side, and I'd go get these wonderful apricot danishes and take them, go to her where she was living at the time, and we'd have breakfast and then go to class, you know. So I'd go home, sleep for 5-6 hours, then get up in the morning, get her some breakfast and take it to her. And I remember doing this one day, and then we walked over to the bus stop on Broadway, got on the bus, and there was George Balanchine sitting there, you know, and I felt very strange. Now, why I felt so strange, I don't know. He didn't say much, you know, but I felt a little strange because it was in the morning, it was 9 o'clock, and, you know, I didn't want him to think that there was something going on here necessarily that wasn't proper.
I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of dances before Suzanne was born. Balanchine obsessed by them. I mean, I can remember Freddie Ashton choreographing a pas de deux for Diana Adams and I. I was 17 years old, and it was Tristan and Isolde. And Balanchine adored Diana Adams. And he was so jealous of Freddie Ashton that he would send Eddie Bigelow in to interrupt rehearsal. Jealousy. So was he in love with Diana Adams? Yes, in his way at that time. Was he obsessed by her? Yes, he would peek through the keyhole to watch the rehearsal. I mean, so was he obsessed. So before Suzanne, there were other people. But in later life, Suzanne came.
I wasn't looking for anyone to replace Mr. B. I was just looking for some space in order to find what my feelings were.
My grandmother, of course, you know, Suzanne did come over many times. Suzanne and Balanchine came to our house on 69th Street, our apartment. And, you know, my grandmother once said to me, you know, you better watch out. He's got eyes for her. And, you know, I said, oh, for heaven's sakes.
I was happy enough just to let things ride and to have a friend, a much-needed friend, until one night when he left me at the door and said that he loved me. And I simply said, "Thank you for dinner, and I'll see you in class tomorrow." I just couldn't believe that this was happening. My mother was genuinely concerned for me, I'm sure, but I I think she saw maybe my career disappearing if I stopped seeing Mr. B because of someone else. And she liked the fact that I was his ballerina and what it meant to her life. They became good friends. She would sit with him at the ballet. She became somebody.
I told her that if she couldn't marry Balanchine, it was okay, don't marry Balanchine, but don't get married at all, stay single.
Since Mr. B was so, in a way, irrational about it, the minute I had a friend, everyone pounced on me to get rid of him, or my every action was censored. By then, my mother was hardly speaking to me at all, and I felt really alone, and it seemed natural that the only person who loved me was Paul, and that probably we should get married. My mother did come to the ceremony and cried very loud through the whole thing.
I know that before we even went out there to get married, we all broke down. I mean, it was just it was very difficult, an enormous amount of tension. All this whole thing just culminated into this day of, I mean, it was, I don't remember other than it was very, very tense, but very wonderful.
Danilova was there, Chumkovsky, teachers from the school. Mr. B, if he saw me coming down the corridor, would turn the other way, still remote, but he allowed me to dance, and I took that as a sign that he was dealing with it in his own way, and that as long as I could dance for him, that he would view me as still being loyal, and that was my way of loving him. It sounds kind of silly and very slight, very little in return, but I was at least trying. And somebody was making a decision, even if it was the wrong decision.
As time went on, and I just wasn't dancing anymore. You know, all those wonderful things that I was dancing I was just pulled out.
So in May, there was a gala, and I was to dance the second movement of Symphony in C. Eddie Villello was to do the third movement.
And because of my physical state at that time, I went to Betty Cage, the general manager, and suggested that so that I could absolutely give all of my attention to the dances at a gathering, it might be more prudent to have an understudy do Symphony in C.
In the more recent past, Paul had always done that part. And it seemed normal that he would do it again.
Ballets like Symphony in C, third movement, I was always cast in. And, but like all the ballets I was cast in, I was no longer dancing.
Since there was no direct contact with George, I sent a message via Eddie Bigelow, "Dear Eddie Bigelow." If he didn't dance, then that was obviously a statement that they didn't want him, and that I was not very welcome either. And so I've been accused of sending an ultimatum, but that was really not my intent. But I just wanted everyone to know how desperate I was for this situation to get over with. This day was without a doubt the longest day in my life. I was sitting in my dressing room waiting for something to happen and putting on my makeup way too early. And there was a gentle knock on my door, and it was Madame Pourmel, and she went over and took my costume And she said, "I'm sorry, Suzanne, you're not dancing tonight." I packed my belongings in my theater case, and all my important belongings were in that theater case. My medals that George had given me, my pin that Diana had given me, all those things. I never ever thought I would not be in New York City Ballet. But I wasn't. And I felt, after all that wonderful dancing and the press overnight, it was amazing how they can get pictures and information and so quickly pound into you the devastation. The first days, the first months of leaving the company were quite surreal in a way. We were relieved somewhat at actually getting married, but no one wanted us. Our wanting to dance, our needing to dance to emotionally survive and financially survive were quite bleak.
Because we weren't dancing, we took a trip upstate New York, and our brother-in-law at the time had said, "Hey, you know that island there? I understand it's for sale."
It was in a state of disarray.
You know, it was an abandoned place, full of trash, and we fell in love with it right away.
It was very much reflective of what our lives were like at the time.
The future was unknown, but it was something, I think, a goal to work for.
It was good therapy to clean up and start fresh. It was the beginning of Paul and I really working out our lives together. Then I received a telegram from Maurice Béjart about coming and dancing with his company in Europe.
So off we went at the end of 1970 to Brussels.
I am too. Oh, it's so good to see you. You look the same.
The same.
I can't believe so many years have
yes,
gone by.
Yeah.
And here we are in Brussels.
Yeah, and I was watching the window where you used to live
I
up
was
there,
too.
just in front of the hotel.
As soon as we got into the city, I started having the smell of Brussels.
Well, we haven't seen it. You've been so many times in my heart, in my brain, in my soul, in my dance.
I wore my black outfit for you, but I wore red for love.
Oh, God. So many things I never found. I mean, it's incredible. You realize when you are at my age that so few people were important in your life. And the more I choreograph, because I still go on, and more I work, and more I think nobody took ever your place. Nobody has been what you've been for me. And nobody. And then when I watch a video and I say, my God, I mean, it's not only the dance, it's the soul it's the interpretation, it's the life, it's so many things that I never found before and I never found after.
I liked Béjar from the first moment I met him. He had these very hypnotic blue eyes. And I suppose I read a little symbolism into the fact that he would also be my second Mr. B. And he was anxious to do new ballets for me.
She was different, and she was even different from the Balanchine girls. I mean, she was completely different from the other Balanchine. Of course, I saw the Balanchine ballet many times before. I saw it before Suzanne was born with Tall Chief, with Tumanova, with lots of those great stars. But she was completely different, and I was very surprised. She had a freedom of movement with a very clear technical power, but you never felt the technical. You feel the freedom and the musicality. I mean, she's like a violin. I mean, the music come out from her body.
We had a wonderful time, Paul and I, and we were just happy dancing, happy belonging somewhere again in a company. And it was great going from one city to the next and signing up for a room with a double bed in the hotel that we would be staying at. It was the first time, it was a great opportunity, actually the first opportunity that Paul and I really got to know each other. We knew we loved each other. We knew we wanted to get married. Although I think probably in the back of our minds, some of that was, there was a desperateness to have to do that. And suddenly we were a couple, a legitimate married couple with no one looking over our shoulders, and New York seemed very far away.
It was a moment of despair for all of us. We were reflecting the despair of Mr. Balanchine, and that despair then became evident in his work or his lack of work.
So in that process, we all tried to do whatever we could to nurture and to comfort him. And I would take him to dinner. I took him up to Harlem. I had my mother cook some meals for him. He came by the house. We would talk. And we would just talk about anything and nothing, knowing that the hurt was still there, but not to express it. And it began to show on him physically. And it was like his feeling that I've reached the age and I'm not going to have many more muses in my life. And Suzanne was the embodiment of so many different things to him.
Each summer, Béjar would have a wonderful 6-week layoff, and that was enough time for us to move back to the States. I was extremely happy dancing in Béjar's company, but I just knew that I had to dance for Mr. B. So in the summer of 1974, after seeing the New York City Ballet, I thought, what do I have to lose? So I wrote to Mr. B. and said, "Dear George, as wonderful as it is to see your ballets, it is even more wonderful to dance them. Is this impossible? Love, Susie." I'm a dreamer and an optimist, and I was very excited, and a meeting at the end of August was planned. And he didn't ask me, "Would you like to come back to the company?" I didn't say, "Would you take me back to the company?" It was just sort of like, "Well, when do we get to work?"
I knew she belongs to Balanchine. I knew she was spiritual daughter of Balanchine, and I knew it's like something it's not given to you, it's lent to you for a time. So it could be for one day, it could be for 1 century. But one day I knew she had to come back to him. So of course he made me. I remember it was in Amsterdam. We had performance in Holland. It was in a garden. We were walking in a beautiful garden, and hand by hand, and she told me, "Mr. Balanchine need me. I have to go back to New York." And I cried, but in the same time, I knew it was going to be like that.
The night that Susie came back to New York City Ballet, I knew Suzanne was nervous.
Symphony in C is always the last ballet of the evening, so it was a long night waiting to get out there on stage, which magnified all those already magnificent feelings.
And for me, of course, I was mortified, because this was very important to me also. And she was incredible. I can't describe something that you see. You can't describe that kind of beauty.
Memories of her, especially when she came back. She was better. I mean, she was great when she left, and she came back better, mature and fantastic.
It was really funny because before leaving the company, not many people took Mr. B's class, but sure enough, the day I returned to the company, everybody was in class, wondering just what was going to happen. Here she comes again. What kind of trouble is she going to be?
And she came and said, "I want to stand next to you at the bar. Where are you standing? Please, I want to stand next to you at the bar." And I remember how touched I was by that.
You could tell eyes going back and forth from George to me, and I just said, "Oh, I don't care what they think. They're all waiting for my first move. They're all waiting to see what's going to happen." So I just went up to him and gave him a hug, and he was very sweet, and he unloosed his tie and rolled up his sleeves and said, "First position," and I was relieved to start dancing again.
By then you are up. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Okay. It's very important to be on the music at all these other places, otherwise it just looks messy. Thank you. It's good. Many things that I like a lot. No, I think it's very good. If I were still dancing, I would steal many things.
Ce qui est dur, c'est que je pense beaucoup. have to think.
Yeah, I know. You need to sleep. You know, you need to live with it. And also, when you learn something with the idea that you have to perform immediately, you only learn steps. You don't learn the life that exists in that ballet and all the possibilities.
Premiere of Suzanne was in May of 1975. It was the first ballet Mr. B had done for me since my return to the company. And now when I look back, because it never occurred to me at the time, but my whole repertoire practically, I was in white, either white leotard or white leotard with skirt or a white chiffon costume. My whole image, Bizet, Symphony in C, white tutu, I was always in white. And it's a hard color to wear, and at the same time, it's a very beautiful color to wear because it can give you many options of different colors that you can be on stage, even though you are in white, since I think it's a sort of a prism of which you can dance through. But this time when I came back, he saw me in red. Now that we have the costume. Bonjour. The costume has arrived. Treasure. This is the board.
The color is not the same.
No, but it's beautiful, yes?
C'est complètement... It was more easy for us, even if we have this costume at the beginning. Now it's really late.
We only have to make one.
We can put a croquet in girls. It's not a problem, you know. But I think that we can... But the color is different. Faut changer la couleur. Hein?
When I think of Suzanne, I don't see green. It looks, to me, it looks Irish, not gypsy.
Irish? Irlandais?
Irlandais. Red is gypsy. There's no green in the ballet at all in America. I'm not
I don't know.
being
I'm sorry.
mean.
I'm sorry because I have only this
I know.
document. I don't know the name.
I know.
J'ai pas vu un document de ça. Okay.
Okay. I know what we can do. When the public comes, they can put red glasses on.
C'est joli, hein. C'est quand même plus joli, tu vas voir celui d'Elisabeth. J'aime pas les couleurs. Non. Je vois pas pourquoi on met des couleurs jaune, vert. Ce qu'elle dit, c'est irlandais, ce qu'on a.
Yeah, it looks like Irish fantasy.
Œuvre de programme de la soirée.
My solo in Zagan is perhaps the most lonely thing a performer could be doing. There's only one violinist that you don't even see. So it really is like piloting a plane by radar in a storm.
It's a wonderful ballet. I've hardly ever seen the ballet. It's really very good. And tomorrow will be something different. You know?
Yeah, sure.
It's fun. It's so much fun. Good. Thank you. Now you have to see. Thank you.
Mr. B and I never spoke about what happened those earlier years and the whole departure, the whole breakup. And it wasn't really necessary.
He treated her differently than before. He was very careful not to, much more respectful and careful, not to get emotionally involved as little as possible, to accept this wonderful dancer he loved and this treasure back, and not to lose it again. And she treated him differently, I think. She also the same way, that, you know, sometimes when there's big hurts and then you come back, you don't want to get hurt again. So you never take the chance emotionally.
It seemed as though I had a marriage, I came back, I had George, I had a career, but at the same time, I would minimize just how wonderful it was dancing again when I came home and discussed it with Paul, because I knew that he would have liked to have had some kind of future.
I had hopes. I mean, I did have a wonderful conversation with Mr. Balanchine when I came back, and he agreed to meet with me, which was, you know, very, very nice. And I was very candid with him. I said, you know, I'd love to work for you again. I'd love to work here. You're the only person that can teach me anymore, you know. I'd like to continue that. And he was, you know, very sweet, very nice. He said, oh, no, you don't want to be here. It's too big, it's too crowded, too many people. You need to go and do your own company. Maria Tallchief is in Chicago. You know, I'll call her, you go there. And I said, well, thank you very much, but I'm not ready to go anywhere yet. And I was sort of laughing inside. I said, well, I guess he still doesn't want me around.
It hadn't occurred to me when I returned to Mr. B who I would dance with. The most important thing was to work with Mr. B again. But suddenly, Peter Martins was there. I realized that for Jacques, a lot of time had gone by because he was an active dancer when I left, and now he was no longer active to the extent that he would have liked to have been.
The times for our dancing together were the 60s, before she left. That was the great time. And the first year or so when she came back. Then injuries were stopping me all the time.
And in time, Peter had been taking over his roles. And I remember the first time we touched each other, it was like an electric current coming through. And there was just this wonderful kind of new chemistry. And we had an easy understanding of each other's dancing and liked to move on the same big scale. It was just the perfect three-way partnership, Mr. B, Peter, and I, for this new phase that we were going into. At one point, he very candidly started talking about his feelings. He said, "It was not right. I was an old man. I never should have thought about you that way. You should have had your freedom. You should have had your marriage." And I suppose those were words that I had wanted to hear for so long in a way, and then having heard them, him having said them, they suddenly were not what I wanted to hear, because I never thought of him as an old man in that sense. So it was a bittersweet sort of evening. In 1980, Mr. Balanchine had decided on a ballet to Schumann's music called David's Tanze. And I think he really wanted to make a statement in this ballet about his mortality.
Balanchine's choreography in David's Dancer is extremely sophisticated, of the highest level of complexity, and it seems simple. It seems ordinary when you just take a step, but put together, they are fantastic. Only a genius at the height of his level could have done David's Dancer.
Both the pas de deux we have are very desperate in nature. Elusive, me running away, Jacques trying to catch up to youth.
The last performance I ever danced was with Suzanne in David's Dancer, and it haunts me. And I sometimes, see myself in the wings waiting to make the entrance, and, that wonderful lift carrying her off.
And I went on. I did end up in Chicago after a couple more years. And I did a full-length ballet, Cinderella, with Balanchine's help, and with Suzanne in the lead role and Adam Luders. So, I did end up working with Balanchine anyway. He's very close to me still.
It was a mixed blessing that Paul went to Chicago. It was, I was excited that he had a place to go and a place to start choreographing and working and have a future. Either way, we were giving something up. The marriage wouldn't have worked if he was just following me around in my career either. And clearly you can't have everything. One day, in the spring of 1981, I remember George coming to my dressing room and saying, "I have an idea for a ballet called Mozartiana."
Keep worrying all through this. You've come off point. One. This was good. Just make sure that your arms are not too long in front of your face. I mean, they come lower, and then they only go up because you're reaching for a higher place, but not so much, not like this for all that time. And when the curtain opens, you get the nicest breeze on your skirt, and it's like, you know, a cloud. It's a great heavenly kind of feeling that you have. It sort of sets the whole tone.
After a performance of Mozartiana, George said, "You know, I like the ballet." He rarely patted himself on the back in that sense, but he said, "You know, I like the ballet." And I said, "Oh, I'm so happy you do, because it's such a wonderful work to dance. This is what heaven must be like." Early in the morning, 4 a.m., April 30th, 1983, I received a phone call. And it was Eddie Bigelow saying that Mr. B had passed away, and it was just such a strange feeling. I felt so alone. I suppose I knew he would not be there one day, but I just was unprepared. And I sort of wandered around the apartment and did all sorts of things, thinking of him, and I felt lost, and went to the theater and met some people and felt like such an orphan. And I thought, at that moment, I really didn't think I wanted to dance again. It seemed as though I would never be understood the way Mr. B had understood me, and loved the way Mr. B had loved me, and used the way he had choreographed for me. And I thought it was not going to be the same. It wasn't necessary to dance anymore. I almost denied the fact that he was gone. I would rattle around in my apartment and felt as though I was so strong-willed, I felt if I look out my window and try real, real hard, I'll see George walking down the street in his trench coat. And it just didn't happen. And I remember coming home from the burial service after the funeral, and came to my window, and suddenly I was surrounded by this white light, almost blinding me. And after it passed, I felt charged. I said, no, I really have to go on and dance. I had 5 more years of dancing after Mr. B's death. The last thing I did was Vienna waltzes, and the trumpets are blaring, heralding my entrance, and it was as if George was standing there in the first wing again, and I felt a little push, and I started walking on my ever-faithful diagonal alone. And curtsying to this imaginary partner, and it occurred to me, oh, how nice. Mr. B and I are dancing together again. I knew that there would be some kind of festivities or goodbyes at the end of this evening, but I was really unprepared for the love and the warmth and the hundreds of white roses. It was just overwhelming. I was nervous about retiring because I didn't know who I would be if I didn't dance anymore. My whole existence was how I danced and who I was on stage. So I was really panicky as to what reason I had after that. I was happy to wake up the next morning and realize that I was still myself, that I hadn't changed. I only had stopped dancing. But I was shocked to find that music, the very thing that made me want to dance in the first place, was made me sad to have to listen to. I just, for the longest time, couldn't listen to any kind of beautiful music. But I got over that when I started to stage ballets and could feel alive and active again physically and relate to the music. Go under your arm. When we were in the company, I remember so well at the State Theater in the early 60s, Mr. B saying, you know, you're all going to teach one day. And we'd look at each other and we'd laugh, you know, because when you're a dancer, a young dancer, those days are just so far away, and you think, oh no, I'm never gonna teach, and I just want to dance now, and when it's over, I'm gonna open a restaurant. And it's so true.
Arabesque like this, he picks you up, and now is when you do.
I love teaching, and to teach is another way of dancing.
Touch the floor and exit. And you just go swim and swim at the moment you touch. It's like doing this, only he does it in the air with you. Right.
Just do
yes, and touch the floor and touch the floor, like your stones on the water, skimming. It's pretty.
Yeah, very pretty. No, I saw you the first time.
It's very nice to do too. It's bittersweet.
I always feel like she has a direct line with Balanchine. She's so in tune with him.
All this time?
She's almost like a channel.
You hear that?
Yes. Like through her, the choreography leaves again.
I believe it was destiny. I could not have loved Mr. B in my life. And we had all those lives on stage through all those glorious ballets and all that wonderful music. And it made me who I am. danced, and I'm grateful that I can look back on my life and I don't have any kind of prefaces of, oh, if only I had done this, if only I had worked harder, if only I had done that. There are no if onlys in my life.